AITA for ignoring my boyfriend when he asked me to split the check with his family and only paying for my food. I never expected to find myself in a situation like this, but here I am, questioning everything about my relationship because of one family dinner. And the worst part? I can't even tell if I'm in the wrong. My friends are divided, my boyfriend is still upset, and I am left with this lingering feeling of resentment that I don't know how to shake off. Let me start by saying that I wasn't even particularly eager to go to this dinner in the first place. My boyfriend's mother and sisters have never exactly warmed up to me. It's not that they are outright hostile, but there's a certain coldness, an indifference that I can't quite ignore. They have their own inside jokes, their own rhythm of conversation, and I have always felt like an outsider when I'm around them. That's fine, I told myself. Not everyone has to like me. But when I got the invitation to attend my boyfriend's mother's birthday dinner, I was genuinely surprised. I even allowed myself to feel a little hopeful. Maybe this was a sign that things were changing, that I was finally being included. For some background, both my boyfriend and I come from working-class families, but our experiences growing up were very different. My parents worked hard, and as they found financial stability, they made sure I had a comfortable life. My boyfriend, on the other hand, had a very different upbringing. His father was convinced that his mother was using their children as an excuse to get money from him, so he refused to provide them with anything beyond the bare minimum. Eventually, he left, remarried, and my boyfriend and his siblings were raised mostly by their mother, who struggled to make ends meet. There are 4 siblings in total, and while they all have jobs now, money is still tight for them. I have a successful career and make a comfortable salary. My boyfriend makes significantly less, about 5 times less than I do, but it has never been an issue between us. Or at least, it wasn't until his mother's birthday dinner. When we arrived at the restaurant, I immediately felt out of place. The conversation flowed easily between them, but I struggled to find a way in. They reminisced about family memories, inside jokes, old TV shows, and hobbies I knew nothing about, manga, wrestling, bands I had never heard of. Every time I tried to contribute, it felt like my words were just floating into the void, unnoticed. I wasn't even making eye contact with anyone because they simply wouldn't look at me. Then came the moment that really drove the point home. The first time I was talked over, I brushed it off. Conversations at big tables can get chaotic, and I wasn't going to be overly sensitive. But the second time, I started speaking and had to restart my sentence multiple times because they just kept talking over me. It wasn't even subtle. It was like I wasn't there. At one point, I realized that I was literally talking to myself because they had already moved on with their discussion while I was mid-sentence. My boyfriend noticed and tried to make light of it, but by then, I already felt humiliated. It was like I had been invited just to sit there as background noise. At one point, he went to take a picture with his siblings and then sat 3 seats away from me. I wasn't completely alone on my side of the table, but by that time, I was already checked out. I considered pulling out my phone just to scroll because what else was I supposed to do? I felt ignored, out of place, and completely disconnected from whatever was happening around me. Then came the check. There were about 16 people in total, siblings, their partners, and grandchildren ranging from around 8 to 22 years old. The table had ordered multiple appetizers, desserts, and drinks, especially the pricier margaritas. I had kept my order pretty simple. 2 soft drinks, 1 margarita, ribs, and soup. My bill was under $100. But as soon as the check arrived, my boyfriend's mother immediately announced that the total needed to be split among the adults, which meant that 8 of us, excluding her since it was her birthday, had to cover everything. I did a quick mental calculation and realized that my share would be around $160 to $170. This didn't sit right with me. I had not indulged in all the extra drinks and appetizers, and I didn't think it was fair for me to subsidize the entire table's expenses. I quietly told my boyfriend that I preferred to either pay for just my own meal or, at most, cover mine, his, and his daughter's portion. His response? He looked at me with this expression of disbelief, like I had just insulted his entire family, and basically called me a tightwad. That stung. It really did. Because I have never been cheap. I have never hesitated to spend money on experiences, gifts, or anything that brings joy to the people I care about. But this? This wasn't about generosity. It was about fairness. Why should I be expected to chip in extra just because I make more money? Why should I have to absorb costs for a group of people who had spent the evening ignoring me? I insisted that I would pay for my own share, and that's when he got visibly angry. His face contorted. I don't know if that's the right word, but that's what it looked like. He leaned in and yelled at me, speaking in a low but aggressive voice, telling me not to act up and embarrass him in front of his family. That was the moment I felt completely bullied. I told him that. I didn't make a scene. I simply got up, found our waitress, and asked for a separate check. I even left a generous tip because she had been incredibly kind and helpful. When I returned to the table and he realized what I had done, his face turned red. The entire table went silent. On our way to the car, he was furious. He told me that this should be the last time I ever embarrass him in front of his family. He accused me of using a family celebration to show off my financial status, saying that I knew his family wasn't rich and that splitting the check evenly would have been the kind thing to do. Every time we have discussed it since, he keeps bringing up how they are struggling financially and how they made sacrifices just to be there. I haven't replied to his messages since that night. He has apologized, but I am struggling to believe that he won't do this again. The last time we spoke, I told him I wouldn't be attending any more of his family functions. I just don't see the point in putting myself in situations where I feel unwelcomed and undervalued. My friends are divided. Most of them support me, but some say I am throwing away a good relationship over money. But I don't see it that way. Why should I be expected to cover for others just because I am financially independent? Why does my success suddenly mean I have to burn my own wallet to save theirs? And the most painful question of all, why did he, the man who has always been kind and supportive, suddenly turn against me over this? I feel lost. Did I truly put him on the spot? Was I wrong to stand my ground? Update 1. After that disastrous dinner, I needed space. I didn't want to jump into another conversation or argument, and I certainly didn't want to hear more justifications about why I should have been willing to subsidize his family's meal. So I took a step back. I didn't block my boyfriend or cut him off completely, but I let the conversations fizzle into a dry, unremarkable silence. I wondered if he even understood why that situation had affected me so deeply. It wasn't about the money. It was about the entitlement, the way I had been made to feel like an outsider, and the fact that, when I had stood my ground, the person who should have had my back had instead turned on me. He had called me embarrassing. He had accused me of flaunting my financial position. Not once did he acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't fair to expect me to pay more just because I earned more. Weeks passed. I didn't reach out, and neither did he, at least, not in any way that mattered. His texts were routine, impersonal, a vague attempt to pretend things were fine without actually addressing the root of the problem. I wasn't going to be the one to force the conversation. If he wanted to fix things, he needed to come to me with more than just half-hearted apologies. Then, out of nowhere, he messaged me in an uncharacteristically cheerful tone. His sister was hosting a family dinner, and they wanted me to come. I stared at my phone for a long time, trying to process what I was reading. It made no sense. His family had never taken the initiative to include me before, and after what had happened at his mother's birthday, I was almost certain they wouldn't even want to see me again. But he insisted. He said that things had changed, that they wanted to improve their relationship with me, that it was really important for them to have me there. I hesitated. Every rational part of me said that this was a bad idea. But there was another part of me, the part that still wanted to believe in the best of people, that thought maybe this was a real gesture of reconciliation. Maybe they had realized they had been cold and were trying to make amends. Maybe my boyfriend had talked to them, explained how I had felt, and they genuinely wanted to fix things. So I agreed. The restaurant was just as it had been before, loud, crowded, a mix of chatter and overlapping conversations that I wasn't a part of. I felt the same creeping sense of isolation as soon as I sat down. They didn't ask about me, didn't include me in conversations, didn't make any effort to acknowledge me beyond a polite hello. It was exactly the same dynamic as before. I kept telling myself that this was just how they were, that maybe I was expecting too much. Some families had their own way of communicating, and I wasn't going to magically integrate overnight. So I sat there, eating my meal, listening but never really participating. My boyfriend was right there, but he wasn't paying much attention to me either. He was absorbed in the conversation, laughing at jokes I didn't understand, completely at ease in a way that made me feel even more like an outsider. Then the check arrived. His sister barely hesitated before saying, "Well, shall we split it equally?" It was so casual, so effortless, like it was the most natural thing in the world. For a split second, I thought maybe I had misheard her, but then I saw the nods around the table, the expectation settling in. I immediately did the math in my head. My portion of the bill would be around $180. My meal had cost maybe half that. I felt my stomach tighten, but I kept my voice calm as I said, "I'll just pay for myself." For a moment, there was silence. A slight shift in the atmosphere, barely noticeable but unmistakable. One of his sisters frowned, barely concealing her displeasure, and then she said it. "So, you're seriously dating him? Can't you help out a little?" That was it. The moment of truth. This wasn't about reconciliation. This wasn't about getting to know me better or trying to build a relationship. This was a test. They had invited me to see if I was willing to fit in with their family, not emotionally, not personally, but financially. And I had just failed. The illusion shattered in an instant. I saw it all so clearly now. It had never been about warmth or acceptance. It had never been about making amends. They had no interest in knowing me, in welcoming me, in including me. I was nothing more than a potential asset, a financial buffer, someone who could make things easier for them. And when I refused to play along, their true feelings slipped through. My boyfriend had lied to me. Whether intentionally or not, he had sold me a false hope, convinced me that this was about mending relationships when, in reality, it was about money. He had brought me here knowing exactly how this would play out. And worse, he had let it happen. He had let me walk straight into this trap, knowing full well that his family saw me as nothing more than a walking wallet. I felt no anger, no frustration. Just clarity. I had no more illusions. Update 2. A few more weeks passed. My boyfriend and I didn't talk about his family, though the weight of everything that had happened between us sat in the air like an unspoken storm. I wasn't ready to bring it up, and he seemed determined to act like nothing was wrong. But the tension was there, just beneath the surface, waiting for something to set it off. Then, once again, he brought up the idea of another family dinner. This time, it was to celebrate his younger brother's birthday. The invitation came casually, like he hadn't been nursing a quiet resentment towards me for the last few weeks, like I hadn't already seen exactly how his family operated. He framed it as though it was an opportunity to move forward, another chance to mend things. I listened to his words, but all I could hear was the silent expectation hanging behind them. I knew what to expect. I had already lived this scenario twice. I knew how it would go, the conversations that would carry on without me, the inside jokes that would act as a wall keeping me out, the subtle dismissals, the moments of forced politeness that barely masked the fact that I was unwelcome. But I was curious to see if anything had changed. Had they learned anything from last time? Did they even care to? So I went. The restaurant was different, but the feeling was the same. The moment we sat down, I could feel it happening all over again. The way they talked amongst themselves, effortlessly weaving through topics that I had no connection to. The way they made no attempt to include me, to ask me about my life, my work, my interests, anything that might have signaled that they saw me as more than just my paycheck. I watched the way my boyfriend laughed along with them, at ease in a way he never was with me anymore. The realization settled in my stomach like a stone. This wasn't just their way of communicating. This was their way of making it clear that I didn't belong. But this time, they went further. Before anyone even ordered, his sister turned to me, her tone light, her words effortless, like she was asking about the weather. "Maybe you want to order a cake for everyone?" I stopped. The question felt off. Too direct, too casual, as if it had been rehearsed in her head before she even said it. "Why me?" She just shrugged, a simple movement, like it should have been obvious. "Well, you're the most successful of us, it's just a small gesture." That was when I understood. This wasn't just an expectation anymore. This wasn't just a situation where I was supposed to split the bill, to contribute equally despite consuming less. This had become a habit. A pattern. They had started to see me as a financial resource, not a person. A walking, talking ATM. They weren't even pretending anymore. They were actively shaping a role for me in their family dynamic, the person who was supposed to pay for everything. I felt the stares of the table. The unspoken pressure. I had been tested once, and I had failed. This was a second chance to prove myself, to show that I could contribute in the way they expected. But the only thing I felt in that moment was a quiet, seething anger. I kept my voice even when I responded. I said that I didn't mind buying a gift and a cake for the birthday boy, but I wasn't paying for everyone. It was a simple statement, neutral, completely reasonable. But the moment the words left my mouth, the mood shifted. There was another one of those silences, the kind that made it clear that I had, once again, given the wrong answer. The kind that made it clear that they had been expecting something else, something that would have confirmed to them that I was willing to play my assigned role. I could see the reactions flicker across their faces, disappointment, annoyance, a thinly veiled frustration, as though I had deliberately disrupted something they had carefully constructed. My boyfriend didn't say anything, but I could see it in the way his jaw clenched, the way his shoulders tensed ever so slightly. It was all the confirmation I needed. He had known. He had known exactly what his family was doing, and he had brought me here anyway. We went through the rest of the dinner in a haze of forced conversation and polite smiles that didn't reach anyone's eyes. I barely spoke, and no one seemed to care. The celebration went on without me, just as it always did. When we left and got into the car, the silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. And then, finally, he spoke. "You've shown again that you don't care about my family." The words came through gritted teeth, low and controlled, but laced with anger. A real partner would help not only me, but everyone important in my life. That was it. That was the truth of it all, laid bare in the dark of the car, in the quiet tension between us. This wasn't about love or respect. This wasn't about fitting in or making amends. He didn't just want me to be kind to his family. He believed that my financial stability obligated me to support them. He saw my success not as something I had worked for, not as something I had earned, but as something that should automatically extend to them. He believed that my place in his life came with a duty, to carry his family financially, to make their struggles my own, to sacrifice without question. And in that moment, I knew. It was over. I was silent all the way home. Update 3. After that night, I knew something had to change. I couldn't keep pretending that things were fine, that his family's expectations were normal, that his silence in the face of their entitlement was something I could overlook. The weight of it all had settled into my bones, and I felt exhausted, mentally, emotionally, even physically. It wasn't just about the money anymore, though that had been the catalyst. It was about respect, about dignity, about the way I had been treated as if my presence in their lives only held value if it came with a financial contribution. Every dinner, every interaction, every moment with them had been layered with a quiet, insidious message: I was useful, but I was not one of them. I needed space. I needed distance. I needed time to process everything without his influence clouding my judgment, without his attempts to gaslight me into believing that I was the one who had overreacted, that I was the one with the problem. I needed to see things clearly, to step back far enough to understand whether this relationship was even worth salvaging. Because no matter how I turned it over in my mind, I kept coming back to the same fundamental truth: I wasn't being loved, I was being leveraged. So I took a step back. I didn't officially end things right away, but I made it clear that I needed a break. I stopped initiating conversations. I let his messages sit unread for longer than usual, sometimes hours, sometimes an entire day. The enthusiasm I once had for seeing his name pop up on my screen had evaporated, replaced by an underlying sense of dread. I no longer wanted to make plans, no longer wanted to force myself into another situation where I would be sitting at a table, pretending not to notice the quiet expectation that I would, yet again, be the one to open my wallet. Most importantly, I refused any and all invitations to family gatherings. That was the real breaking point for him, not the arguments, not the tension, not even my cold detachment. It was my refusal to keep playing along with the charade of family unity that truly set him off. He had been able to tolerate my anger, my frustration, my protests, but my absence. That was unacceptable. Because my absence wasn't just a personal decision, it was a statement. It was me saying, without words, that I saw what was happening and I was no longer willing to participate. At first, he tried to pretend that nothing had changed. He kept texting me as if we were fine, sending me memes, inviting me out like we hadn't just had one of the most revealing arguments of our relationship. He acted like the problem would resolve itself if we ignored it long enough, like I would eventually cave and fall back into the rhythm of how things had been before. Like I would get over it. But I didn't. And that's when he finally confronted me. He told me that his family just wanted to feel like I was part of them, as if this was some grand emotional gesture rather than a financial arrangement. As if I was the one being unreasonable, the one putting up walls, the one refusing to integrate. But it was clear, painfully, unmistakably clear, that the only way I could be part of the family was if I agreed to subsidize their lifestyle. If I stopped resisting the quiet pressure to pick up the bill every time we went out. If I allowed myself to become the financial backbone of their household, not just for him, but for all of them. It wasn't about love. It wasn't about connection. It was about what I could provide. I don't know if he truly believed what he was saying or if he was just trying to manipulate me into compliance, but either way, it didn't matter anymore. Because the moment those words left his mouth, I knew, I was no longer a girlfriend. I was an investment. And they were waiting for their return. My decision had already been made, I just hadn't voiced it yet. Then came the final blow. It happened by accident. A moment of pure chance, of fate delivering a truth I might never have uncovered otherwise. We had gone out to dinner, just the two of us, in what I now recognize as one last attempt to keep me from slipping away completely. The tension between us was palpable, stretched tight like a wire, but we both pretended it wasn't there. Afterward, he stepped inside a store while I waited for him in the car, my mind still looping over the dinner, over the past few weeks, over everything that had brought us to this point. I was distracted, lost in thought, staring out at the street without really seeing anything. And then I heard my name. His sister was outside with a friend, standing just a few feet away, close enough that their voices carried through the night air. At first, I wasn't paying attention. I was scrolling on my phone, trying to distract myself from the sinking feeling that had settled in my chest ever since we'd arrived. But then I caught the tail end of the conversation, and something in their tone made me pause. "Well done," he caught her, one of them said. "They'd be wise to fix her now," the other replied. And then his sister laughed. "If he had married her, we wouldn't have to worry about money." The words hit me like a slap. It wasn't even a question. It wasn't speculation. It was a plan. They had already decided that I was a financial safety net, a guarantee for their future security. I was no longer a person in their eyes, I was a resource, something to be secured, locked down, prevented from escaping. And suddenly, everything made sense. The invitations, the sudden attempts at inclusion, the way they had started to reframe my resistance as selfishness, as a failure to support the family. They had never accepted me as a person. They had tolerated me, humored me, but only because of what they thought I could provide. Their kindness, their gestures of warmth, none of it had been real. It had all been transactional. A slow, careful conditioning to get me to believe that my presence in their lives had to come with a price tag. I sat there, frozen, staring at my own reflection in the car window, realizing that I had been right all along. And worse, realizing that he had known. He had always known. That was the last straw. I ended the relationship. It wasn't even a dramatic breakup. There was no shouting, no big confrontation. Just a cold, detached conversation where I told him I was done. He didn't fight for us. He didn't try to understand. He didn't even seem surprised. He just got angry, angry that I wasn't playing my part, angry that his family's plan had fallen apart, angry that he had lost his best chance at ensuring their financial security. That told me everything I needed to know. His love had a price. And that price was my willingness to become the financial support for his entire family. After that, the invitations stopped coming. No more dinners, no more half-hearted attempts at inclusion. It was as if I had never existed in their world. And that was fine with me. I had spent far too long trying to force my way into a place that had never truly wanted me there. I stopped getting invited to family dinners. But I didn't regret it either.